Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joe Goldberg. I'm a Director of Product Marketing at Snowflake, and I will be the moderator for today's event. Welcome to the Snowflake Office Hours with HashMap, a global data and cloud consulting services firm. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to spend time talking with Kelly Koleffel, who leads sales, marketing, and alliances at HashMap, and has almost 30 years of experience overall in technology and enterprise software. Before HashMap, Kelly was at Hortonworks driving the adoption of their big data and analytical products, and he spent 10 years with Oracle as a key account director, leading a multi-product line account team. Kelly will be talking about HashMap's journey and success using Snowflake during this office hours. As we proceed here, please type any and all questions you have into the Q&A panel on the On24 dashboard. And then at the end of the event, we're going to leave plenty of time for me to verbally ask your questions to Kelly. So actually, the majority of this office hours is going to be allocated to those questions. So for sure, type them into the Q&A panel. And again, nothing's off limits, so ask any and all questions. So without further ado, Kelly, off to you.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for attending the office hours. Kelly Koleffel with HashMap. A little bit about the company prior to kicking off our story with Snowflake. We were founded about 7, 8 years ago. Today, we're about 130 total HashMappers, mostly in North America. We've got an office in India. We've got a small team in Australia as well. And we, as Joe said, really focus in the data and cloud space around the consulting services. For that, we've done over 190 projects now across the last couple of years, various industries. We're not focused on just one particular industry. It's the origins of the company going back to 2012 really come out of the big data space. And it's interesting when you look at the shift to the cloud over the last couple of years. Our business has really been in sync with that shift. We've gone from, I would say, 3 years ago being predominantly on-premise type solutions. In less than a 3-year period of time, the business is about 90% cloud and cloud native. And it's really the way that we got introduced to Snowflake originally. We were doing a traditional big data project for a client out on the West Coast, and they said, hey, we'd love for you guys to help us understand what's going on with this Snowflake solution, the Snowflake service that we're seeing. We did a project for them, tested it out, had some great reviews coming out of that with the ease of migrating the data up to the cloud, getting it into Snowflake, getting the Tableau workbooks working properly, not a lot of refactoring, really none, actually. And it really kind of took off from there. So really appreciate that client getting us introduced to Snowflake a few years ago. From a story standpoint, it's interesting. As you saw, we're a small company. We don't have massive teams of back office or IT people. We are technologists, engineers, consultants. We're in the field helping our clients in really day-to-day projects. Well, about a year ago, we had, for 2 years, we had an IoT software product development team that was spinning up an open source project in the IoT space. We had, roughly a dozen developers or so. And we had, across that team, we had, unfortunately, some AWS credentials that got committed to a public GitHub repo on this open source project. So obviously not great. It happens periodically. Those credentials were picked up by a very bad actor, and all of a sudden we woke up one morning to find that there had been a substantial amount of VMs in our AWS cloud instance that had been fired up, were running globally overnight. And these were not just your run-of-the-mill compute instances. These were GPUs, and we don't really use GPUs here, and so we knew it wasn't us. And so we contacted AWS immediately. They suspected that those credentials had been picked up by a crypto miner, and there was some major crypto mining going on. For us, again, it may not sound like a lot to some people, but it was roughly $15,000 in charges overnight. For us, that's a lot of money. AWS was fantastic. They forgave a large amount of that. Obviously, the credentials were reissued, and it really led us to obviously start tracking this down. How did this happen? How could it be prevented? And what really was the cause of this? And that's how at the time we were working with Snowflake, and we said, look, we've got this cloud data warehouse that has tremendous amounts of capabilities. We've got these pain points where we're getting these unauthorized AWS charges. We've got very limited capability to really determine what happened and why it happened. Obviously, with AWS, you get your CloudTrail logs and those types of things, but across the entire environment, it's really challenging to get an overall picture of what's happening. And as you could tell from what happened to us, I mean, we were really really not in a proactive state at all, completely reacting. So we wanted to try to figure out how could we get into doing more continuous monitoring, and that's what really led us to leveraging Snowflake. What's interesting, there was the Snowflake security engineering team at the time was working on an open source project called Snow Alert, and if you go check it out, it's really an interesting solution. It's not an add-on to Snowflake. It's an open source project that you can use in conjunction with Snowflake for security monitoring. Now, I think everybody knows, or if you don't, Snowflake is widely known as the leading cloud data warehouse on the market. So when you start talking security, this would be a net new analytics solution. This isn't necessarily what you first think of with Snowflake, but for us, it fit the bill really well. Again, remember, we didn't have a large, security team. We didn't have a lot of, tooling or anything like that we really relied on, and we had a really nice solution in place with Snowflake that we could leverage to try to, again, get into more of a proactive state. So when you look at what we were doing before versus, after Snowflake and after Snow Alert, we really had a reactive posture. Again, think of a lot of data engineers. I think you saw on the previous slide that we believe that security is a data engineering problem in a lot of cases, and don't take the way that we're leveraging Snowflake and Snow Alert to say you don't need anything else. That's not it at all. But if you've got data engineering skill sets, you've got Snowflake available, this is a really interesting way to start getting to value, because when you're talking about just using CloudTrail logs on their own, it becomes really hard to parse through those. The noise, the signal, everything gets kind of mixed up in there, and you've got thousands of these things where something that might be an issue could really be buried. Contextually, it's difficult too. Maybe you've got some other systems of record, maybe you have some other operational systems that you want to combine information up with these CloudTrail logs to get a better picture of what's going on. If I'm operating in silos from system to system, that gets pretty challenging. And again, I mentioned before, we did not have a lot of specialized security SME skill sets. We have data engineers, and we work with data on a regular basis. So that's the way that we approached it. I would say post-Snowflake, there was a much simpler approach to really separating some of that signal from the noise. We had more of a self-service posture moving forward, where if there was somebody on the management team that wanted to, be alerted about something, that could happen automatically, as opposed to, like I said, the old way of, kind of waking up and saying, hey, what happened here? And we weren't as reliant just on the built-in services that the cloud service providers gave us. We could very quickly customize whether it be a report or a particular interaction within Snowflake, just using a SQL skill set. We didn't have to have specialized skills to be able to get at the value. And so that was really important to us. the one of the things too that we found out as we kept going along on this is that it was important to be able to visualize this. We leverage and still leverage today a solution called Sigma, which is tightly integrated with Snowflake for BI visualization. You will find, I don't know that you'll find a better solution from an integration standpoint out there. They're working on other things, but from a Snowflake integration perspective, they do a great job. The other thing that we wanted to do was leverage another partner, which was Fivetran. They've got, if you're not familiar with Fivetran, they've got a managed ETL platform. So your schemas, your structures on the Snowflake side are automatically generated. They've got a nice AWS integration. We leverage the Lambda functions within Fivetran to really set that up, check across all of our AWS accounts, users, IAM groups, the policies, roles, all those kind of things. And that was pre-formatted, put into Snowflake, really ready to query. And if you haven't used Fivetran before with Snowflake, highly, highly encourage you to do that. It's a great way to go to get to value. So that's a little bit from a story standpoint on where we were, what we're doing today, again, moving from a reactive to more of a proactive monitoring and alerting posture using Snowflake and Snow Alert. And if I can slide here, I'd say if you want to start, finding hopefully, like we did, a needle or two in the haystack, this is a good approach. Overall, when we're working with Snowflake customers, again, thinking back to our background, we've had and dealt with extremely complex technologies. I think the thing that we like more than anything as a customer of Snowflake is it just works. It's simple. It takes a simplicity to a new level when you're talking about data. Obviously, it's fast. But the ability to not only get good performance, but also have quick time to value is really important when you're talking about something in the security space. And some of our data engineers talk about the fact that you can, set it up and kind of forget about it to a great degree. It's sustainable. It's not going to go down. It's not brittle. Same kind of thing with Fivetran. I mean, you set it up, and the key thing is I don't even want to have to think about it for a pretty good period of time. Lastly, make it self-serve regardless of your user type, regardless of the data type. These were JSON files, the CloudTrail logs. Regardless of the data type, Snowflake can handle structured and semi-structured data really well. And let me use the SQL tools that I'm really familiar with. Don't cause me to have to go down an esoteric tool path to get value. So I hope that's helpful. We, as I said, needed to kind of start separating the signal from the logs. And I think what we found, and Randy on our team says it better than anybody, that having getting the cloud logs or the CloudTrail logs is not the tricky part. It's really knowing what to do with those and being able to do it simply, as fast as possible in a sustainable way. So with that, Joe, any questions? Glad to take those.
Yeah, and I'll also pause here to remind people to please submit your questions for Kelly via the Q&A box, because the remainder of the session is really going to be interactive Q&A from all of you attending this office hours. So I'll take a cut at some of the first two that came in, Kelly. And then how about this? While I'm answering these two, one for you can think about is, how is Snowflake different than other data warehouses? And then also, why did you pick Snowflake versus other data warehouses? So while you're thinking about those two, I'll take one on here, which is Snowflake serverless data warehouse? And at a very high level, what we are is we're a cloud-based data warehouse available as a service on either AWS, Azure, or GCP. So you essentially just sign up for us with a UI, right? And you pick the underlying cloud provider, but you don't see that cloud provider as you are in our user interface. It's kind of invisible to you. So we are offered as a service. You don't have to deal with physical hardware at all. We leverage the underlying physical hardware of the cloud platform. So for example, for AWS, that would be EC2 and S3. You don't have to deal with that. You just have to deal with the URL. So it's pretty easy. Another one is Snow Alert, a Snowflake product. And Kelly kind of touched on this, but yeah, it's an open source capability, open source code, if you will, up on GitHub. And if you literally just, probably the easiest way to find it, instead of trying to give you a long URL here, is just literally Google Snowflake and then Snow Alert. And you'll see a page that talks about Snow Alert, some basic documentation, and you'll also see the links to the GitHub repository where you can download Snow Alert. And once you've got Snow Alert stood up, you can use that again to save queries, have them run on a schedule. If they see things that meet their parameters, they will be written to tables inside of Snowflake. So that's the answer to Snow Alert. So Kelly, you want to take a cut at those two questions for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first was some of the differences with Snowflake. Where does it stand out to us as a customer? I think, number one, we look at the fact that it is not only a cloud-native solution. We love the fact that it's a SaaS solution as well, but it's data warehouse native and just data native in general. And when you start looking at the fact that we can we can do ETL or ELT processes. We can have queries running independently without affecting other workloads or other warehouses within Snowflake. There's just not another solution out there that does that today without a tremendous amount of work to even try to come close to that type of functionality. And I think I mentioned this too. Again, going back to our roots in the traditional big data space, it seemed like I was always having to use a new tool, learn a new language, etc. We love the fact that with Snowflake, it's SQL. I mean, if you know SQL, you're going to pick this up very, very quickly. You're going to be productive almost immediately in Snowflake. And then, again, as a smaller company, I think this applies to large organizations as well. I mean, we're all dealing with budgets. The consumption-based pay-by-the-second model for us is really nice. We feel like Snowflake gives you a really great way to help control the costs around how you're using your warehouse, how you're using the applications around that warehouse. And then I would say lastly, Joe, would be the fact that I talked about AWS. We actually run Snowflake in Azure, and we were part of the private preview for GCP as well. So I think for us, having an ability to support customers across a multi-cloud environment is really unique as well.
Gotcha.
And then,
sorry, keep going, Kelly.
Yeah, I think you were asking the second piece. Was it why did we choose Snowflake over other data warehouses?
Yeah, it was the two-parter was kind of how are we different, and then why did you pick Snowflake over other data warehouses?
Yeah, I think it goes back to some of the things that I talked about just a little while ago, but I guess maybe I'll expand on one. For us, not having a lot of, I'll call it legacy baggage, that Snowflake just doesn't bring anything to the table from that perspective. If I look at the other cloud data warehouses out there today, each one is bringing some sort of legacy baggage to the table that I'm probably going to have to deal with, whether it be additional people kind of looking over it, trying to manage around it, trying to operate around it, or just not being able to accommodate nearly as seamlessly or even come close to the performance around those independent compute clusters. So there's a couple of things there. I think when you really break it down, it becomes a pretty easy choice. We talk about all the time, and we see it a lot with our clients, this thing called option fatigue. I feel like there's pretty much zero option fatigue around the cloud data warehouse today. Obviously, the data integration, data engineering ecosystem in and around from whatever your use cases are you going on-prem, you have data sources there, you've got them up in the cloud. That can get a little challenging and fatiguing, but when you look at the cloud data warehousing options today, that becomes very self-evident, I think, if you take a hard look at it. And then if I look beyond cloud to, if I go more traditional on-prem, obviously the cost associated with those and the lack of maybe flexibility, time to value is causing quite a few migrations off of your traditional platforms today. Gotcha.
Another one here, Kelly, is can can you talk people through the different ETLs that you used, and maybe also did you look at Snowpipe at all?
No, that's a great question. I meant to mention it during the talk. We actually use Snowpipe today. When we look at, so a couple of things. I talked about this leveraging of Snowflake for the security use cases. We also use it for our overall cloud cost monitoring. And when each Friday, one of our data engineers has set up an automated process that the management team receives. It's actually a Sigma report. I talked about Sigma from a BI perspective, but it's a Sigma report. It comes through our Slack integration, and it shows what's our Snowflake consumption, what's our cloud consumption, what are the primary services being used. And I would say that because of what we're doing around the security and cost monitoring space, the application that I talked about here that we use internally, almost every week, I would say, those Snowpipe services associated with the security feeds that we're getting, as well as the cost feeds that we're getting from our cloud vendors, those generally are our highest consumption of Snowflake credits versus, say, queries and those types of things. So we definitely we stage the CloudTrail logs and other logs into S3 external bucket. We've got a Snowpipe set up that is looking out there for any new files hitting. It picks it up automatically, promotes it into Snowflake, and it's ready to go from there. The other thing, like I mentioned, that we're doing from an ETL perspective is we've started using Fivetran for some of the cloud costs that we're getting across cloud vendors. So not talking about Snowflake costs here, but what are our Azure costs? How much are we spending on blob storage? How much are we spending on VMs? How much are we spending on this service? Same kind of thing with AWS, and really. That's where we're leveraging Fivetran and that functions capability that's well integrated with Snowflake and integrated with AWS to do the ELT side of things there using Fivetran. So I'd say it's a combination of things, Joe, that we're using right now internally. From I guess where we're dealing with clients on a regular basis, there are probably 8 to 10, maybe 12 major categories of ETL, ELT types of data integration technologies. Probably don't have time to break all those down right now, but it's a fairly robust ecosystem, to say the least, and there's a lot of choices out there.
Gotcha. Yep, thanks. And for those on the line too, who are kind of new to Snowflake, there are many ways to get the data in. So Kelly touched on a couple of them. One is your typical ETL tools like Fivetran, which was mentioned, or MicroStrategy, or pick a vendor. You can use those to batch or stream data into Snowflake. Additionally, we also have connectors for Kafka and Spark, so we can stream data in from those different streaming technologies. We pull it right from them into Snowflake, and then optionally we have a utility called Snowpipe, which is serverless, and it monitors S3 or Azure or Google storage, looking for new files landing on those external stages, and it'll automatically ingest it into Snowflake. So a couple different ways to approach it. And someone had asked, they said, you mentioned Sigma and Fivetran. Kind of what are these? Can you provide links to them? So Fivetran was just a popular ETL tool that Kelly had mentioned, and I recommend you just Google it. That's an independent software vendor. And then Sigma is an example of a business intelligence tool, kind of like a Looker or a Tableau, but it's fully 100% cloud-based. So just Google Sigma and BI, and you'll find their website. Those are just some good tools to leverage. So let's see.
To add on to that, I was going to say, I think maybe one of the reasons both those tools are pretty popular with Snowflake, we talked about Snowflake being a SaaS service, fully managed. A lot of that infrastructure effort, if not all of it, pretty much taken out. And Fivetran and Sigma are the same. So you're looking at SaaS solutions. I don't have to deal with infrastructure. Let's let the smart guys at Snowflake and Fivetran and Sigma really handle that. Let's focus on the big business outcomes that we're trying to generate, for us in this case, security outcomes and cost monitoring outcomes.
Yep. Quick question. Does Snow Alert work with an Azure backend? Yeah, it'll work with basically any backend, and also Snowpipe will also work with any sort of any cloud provider. So Kelly, another question for you is maybe what are some lessons learned in your implementation, some best practices you have for folks on the line?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add on just real quick to the Snow Alert piece, if you go out to the public GitHub for Snow Alert, you're going to see quite a few connectors. I know when we started working with the Snowflake engineering team on Snow Alert, there were maybe just a couple of connectors. And now you're going to see a pretty wide range. AWS, Azure, you'll see Okta out there. You'll see a number of things that make this much, much easier. And lastly on that, for the folks that aren't as familiar with Snow Alert, it's really made up of two capabilities. It's these alerts, which are kind of the time urgent events. It's on a schedule. I'm going to really be notified of things that are should not be happening. But then there's also this notion of violations, and it's more little things, I would say, in your environment that are not best practice, or maybe they're actually bad practices. You know, at open security groups or those types of things may not mean that, you know, there's something bad going on, but it may be something that you want to be alerted about, and it could lead to problems down the road if you're not aware of it. So I just wanted to mention that. You asked me, Joe, about best practices. I think that there's a couple of things that we found out as we were going through our particular implementation with Snowflake as it relates to security. We pick out the top three. Number one, I'd say, and I just talked about alerts and violations. So set your violations within Snow Alert so that across multiple developer accounts, we can ID and identify if someone has unauthorized access. We have, again, you might imagine we're dealing with a lot of projects going on. We have consultants rolling on and off. I want to ensure that, you know, for a particular service within the cloud, that, you know, a particular consultant, once he's done, he rolls off. And I think this applies. You think about folks that are, you know, maybe leaving an organization. A lot of that system access and deprovisioning can be pretty manual. There's ways to help ensure that, you know, those types of violations are not happening within your environment. Another piece that we found from a best practice standpoint was try to ensure that different services that you're using have different levels of tagging. And this goes back to being able to trace who is responsible for it. If it's not tagged at a granular enough level, it may be difficult, or it may take excess time to really go back and do maybe the sleuth work on that, if you will. So if you can get some level of granularity on the tagging as you're looking to you know, address maybe a security type application like we are, that helps out. And number three, I would say that, you know, I guess number three would be mileage is going to vary for everyone. The policies that you have, the ways that you go about security, the teams that you have for security, depending on the size of your organization, and you know, the way that the organization is you know, focused on that, you'll be able to do certain things. Again, I want to make the point that what we're doing is not meant to say you don't need any other solutions within the security space. This is something that is helping us today. And if you are a Snowflake customer today, it's a very quick on-ramp to start getting value in the security, compliance, and cloud cost monitoring space. But I would say do it in the context of everything else that you're doing from a security perspective. Loop in your security teams. Don't do it, you know, on your own, but, you know, get the broader organization involved. Would be the third one, Joe.
Great, excellent. So Kelly, another question for you, and we're gonna go probably a minute or two late here, just because there's some really good questions rolling in. Maybe Kelly, can you talk to the maintenance required to run Snowflake? The question came in asking, you know, how many people does it take to manage and run Snowflake?
No, that's a great question. I think that far and away, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, the Snowflake team and the Snowflake service that's being delivered has done a fantastic job of taking the traditional infrastructure effort out of the equation that a lot of us think about that have been around for a while. Even as whether it relates to on-prem or even in the cloud, but even other data warehouses, all the trying to somehow, squeeze more performance out or, ensure that this group is not impacted. I think that, Snowflake's done a fantastic job of that for us. I would say we don't even have a formal team that's doing our quote unquote management of Snowflake. We've got, a loosely coupled group of data engineers that all participate. And depending on what's going on at the time, they may put in, more time during a week. But there's not, very honestly, there is not a dedicated team that is sitting there constantly watching Snowflake. If on our cloud cost monitoring dashboard at the end of the week, like I said, it kind of closes out the week for us almost. It comes out, Friday, 4 or 5 p.m. If there's something weird on that we want to, take a look at from a cost perspective, we can do that at that point. But that's an automated process, and I think that as you get to know Snowflake, I would encourage you get to know it really well. There's things that you're not going to have to do, but there's things that you're going to want to do to ensure that, again, we're talking about security and cost. Make sure that the security side is well taken care of. They do a tremendous job there, but you also have to do some things on your side and integrate it to your environment. And then make sure that your cost is in line with what you want. And one of the things that we love is that we can monitor that on a daily, a weekly, or monthly basis and know that when we're paying for the Snowflake service, we're actually getting the value out of it that we expect.
Gotcha. So I'm going to go through a couple of questions here that came in. I'm going to go through them kind of rapid fire here. One is about, can we use IBM MQ to stream data into Snowflake? And at a higher level, I do know IBM has built a connector for Snowflake. So if you do a Google query, you'll see the IBM connector for Snowflake. It does use the Snowflake JDBC driver, so I would take a look at that. But at a higher level, there's a lot of different ways you can get data into us. We do support anything that can connect via JDBC or ODBC. We have drivers that offer APIs for Python, R, Spark, Go, Node.js, Net. So between our drivers and ETL tools, there's pretty much an unlimited number of ways you can get data into Snowflake. Someone asked, how do I contact Snowflake? I have a product question. And I recommend you simply just go to our homepage. You'll see a Contact Us button there. Just click on it. You can ask your question there if you have a more detailed question. Someone asked, is there a demo for SnowAlert on the web? I am not aware of a demo for SnowAlert, but if you go to that Contact Us button and ask for a demo, one of our sales reps can reach out to you and can walk you through it. Another question is, can Snowflake directly query data files on S3 Azure Blob using external tables? The answer there is yes. We did announce something a couple months ago. We did announce external tables where we can directly query data that's stored outside of Snowflake. Could be Azure, Blob storage, could be S3. And in that case, yeah, we'll directly query it. The data remains external in your data lake. And we also have another option on that top of that, which is external tables with materialized views, where we can access the external table, but then we sort of suck up the data into Snowflake into a materialized view, so you get more performant, faster queries. So a couple different ways to approach that. Let's see here. So one last question for you then, Kelly. Are you using Snowflake resource monitoring in addition to SnowAlert?
We do use Snowflake resource monitoring, and I guess the comment I would say on that is that there are times where Snowflake has got, it has the data that you want or the information that you want. It may not be in the form of something that is, readily accessible. It's likely that it's there. There is a lot that's already there out of the box, but it's highly likely that if you need something else, you can get that. Our data engineers across the company leverage really a variety of tools. Again, I mentioned a couple of them a while ago, whether they be Snowflake internal tools or I talked about Sigma. We use some other BI tools like Tableau as well. And then on the ETL side. So I'd say for us, it depends on what's the outcome that we're looking to achieve, what are the tools that are available, maybe that we already have in our environment. I think for larger organizations, it also becomes a question of, what's already approved. Has InfoSec approved this? Have my infrastructure teams or cloud teams already approved this particular service or this particular tool? And I would say definitely do your reviews of Snowflake across the board, because there's a lot that's built into the service where there are times where you will not have to go, a lot of times actually, where you won't have to go outside and get another tool. Joe talked a little bit about Snowpipe and some other things here. So for us, variety of tools used, fit for purpose to the application and the use case. Joe, any other questions right now? I can't, this is Kelly. I'm not able to hear you if you were still on there. Well, if anybody's still on, it looks like we lost Joe. I'll wrap up then. Again, really appreciate everybody joining today. I hope that the information presented was of value, and if you have any questions, do feel free to reach out. Hit me on email or LinkedIn or phone. And I do believe that the Snowflake team is going to send out a recording of the office hours to you probably within a 24 to 48-hour period. So with that, Joe or Zoe, unless somebody has any other closing comments, I think we can wrap it up for the afternoon. So thanks a lot, everybody.